last session, I have been speaking about, as I speak many times, the dying paradigm of modernity, which is centered around overcoming limits and endings, and how this paradigm has now finally, hit the wall and is starting to show a lot of cracks and is starting to unravel. And considering what if limits and endings were not understood or seen as an obstacle to be overcome by more technology, but rather a rhythm of life to be honored and moved with. What if we could cooperate, with the fact that things end and there are limits. The biosphere has limits, our lives have limits, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that would totally fundamentally shift how we engage with ourselves, how we engage with others, with the systems we create, and with the finitude of the biosphere of this planet. If we, could integrate that more fully into the way how we think about our world, the stories we tell ourselves, the mythos. And I think that's why people come to this gathering who have woken up to that, that this is where the change needs to come from a different understanding. And I think that's why we are also in such a turmoil now and in this confusing time between two paradigms, two narratives, where the old one of seeking safety from nature in separation and domination is basically dying because he can't be sustained, while the new one, the new one of acknowledging that we are participants of a living intelligent system, which we call planet Earth or Gaia, is emerging, and it's just starting to be felt, and it's new. I mean, there have been, individuals speaking to that since about 50 years at least, but it was very, very little, and now it slowly seems to become more spread out, and it touches more and more people. And what we notice is that the situation is much messier than what our familiar programs, in the world, in terms of politics and administration and so on, what they can really offer. Both the right and the left, quote unquote, have been trying to implement particular versions of progress. One, focus more on market freedom, and the other one more on social rights. But it was all about, moving from the local towards the global in the name, of modernization or in the name of modernity. And now we are waking up that this direction is no longer available because the biosphere and climate change, have called time on it. So, making that as the main thing, we are all doing as a civilization to try to spread that out over the globe and make it available for everybody. The planet can't carry this. And I brought a quote by Bruno Latour, a French philosopher, and he wrote a book which is called Down to Earth. He wrote it in 2018. Politics in the New Climatic Regime. And he gives a very poignant simile about the situation, and I just want to read that for you. It's a good image, illustrating the predicament. And it's about people on on a plane. People find themselves in the situation of passengers on a plane that has taken off for the global, to whom the pilot has announced that he has had to turn around because one can no longer land at that airport, which is called the global. And then later on, they hear with terror, he says again, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking again." And then he says that the emergency landing strip, the local, is also inaccessible. So both of them. And the only direction of travel that remains available is the title of his book, Down to Earth. And by Akumulafe, whom I sometimes quote also, he also says, "We are coming down to earth. We will not arrive intact because we will be changed by this only trajectory that is still open to us, to come down to earth." And because we have kind of lost connection, in order to reconnect, we will be changed. And with these guided meditations here at the Earth Worm Gathering, that's what we try to basically open up to being changed, to being rewired, by inviting that. So that's a totally different approach, which is neither progressive nor conservative, but it's a possibility of composting the traditions that matter to us and see, how we can transform them. So attending and a care to the decay of those old ways, to see how they can contribute to the possibility of life continuing and thriving again at one point. And that's what planet Earth has been doing since over 4 billion years. There has been many bottlenecks before, and that's another one now. But for us, for us it's the first one in this lifetime, the really big one, collective one in the West. And then I've brought another quote from Vanessa Andreotti from her book Hospicing Maternity, which is an excellent book. I suggest to anyone, you could find it on my website if you're interested under resources. And she's currently actually writing a second book, which will come out in August, which is called Outgrowing Modernity. And she's very, very brilliant woman. And she says, it is pretentious to think that we humans can, quote unquote, birth a new world. But since we are part of nature and not the center of it, we can learn to trust the healing capacity of its metabolism to work through us. If we can decenter ourselves to allow it to happen. And I think that's what we like to do with the support of the Buddhist teaching, because the Buddhist teaching is all about letting go of the ego, basically, and increasingly allowing more openness. And I think the guided meditations we share, they work in that direction. Because these new worlds, they are presently unimaginable. We can't really know how it's going to be, but we can allow the process to work through us. And then we be more and more able, to imagine what these worlds might look like. So it's the inside job, we all need to do if we want to help accelerate that process, to work on ourselves, to work on our fears, to work on our anxieties and maybe hopelessness, helplessness, the grief, all of what we're experiencing at this time. Knowing that this is actually part and parcel of the process, which will make us more available for these new ways of doing and being to emerge through us. To opening up the stuckness of the old paradigm, which is weighing down on us and expanding perception. And I like to guide us again, in a meditation on that. And in a way, for us, Western people, we are relative sheltered still from a lot of the repercussions. So using our privilege and in that way, contributing to the softening of that crash, which is underway, of the fall. And using our privilege that we have the time and the computer and the circumstances, that we can actually meet in this way. And have the, support of like-minded people to be able to allow this to work through us. However, challenging it can be. And it tends to come in waves, I sense that for my own process. Sometimes it feels very exciting and there's a lot of sense of possibility, and then again it feels scary. And there's a sense of hopelessness and anxiety even, sometimes. So we need each other, to do this composting together. Composting ourselves, our old selves, and through this making ourselves available for this rewiring, I would say, and understanding ourselves as part of a living, intelligent earth who always knows what to do. And when we hit these kind of, these so-called obstacles, to understand that they are part of, they are the path. They change us as we are digesting them, as we are metabolizing them inside of ourselves. So please find a posture which works for you for meditation for about 35 minutes. In sensing the earth gravitational embrace, the sense of a weight which keeps us in place where we are sitting. And feeling the aliveness of the body. Maybe you can sense the blood pulsing in your hands or neck. It's just happening, this aliveness. And knowing, this is water element, and it's actually part of the larger water and mineral cycles of your region where you live. You're drinking the water and then going to the bathroom, goes into the sewage system. So all of this, what comes into your body and then stays in it for some time and leaves it again, it's all part of the water cycle in your region, your watershed. Just allowing that contemplation. It's not something we think about a lot. So really, where do you make the cut? Where does it end? Where does it begin? There is no real boundary there. And that way of contemplating is just so different than what we are used to. And just, as blood is nourishing our bodies, so water is the blood of the earth. And here, in Marine where I live, now the hills, which are usually yellow or golden, they are like very, very green at this time of the year because there have been quite a lot of rain. The aliveness of that. And then, noticing the breathing, following the breathing. And that this oxygen which we are breathing in and all other animals comes to us from the plankton and plant life. As they are taking in the CO2 and providing oxygen. So just as the water is the blood of the earth, the oxygen is the breath of the larger earth body. Now feeling the aliveness, the energy body. It's just a little bit, larger than the body, goes a little bit beyond a few inches. And sensing into the aliveness, the energy, which is rising, with the in-breath. And, relaxing, opening with the out-breath. And then maybe you can also feel the muscle tone, maybe the readiness to move, and the source of that energy is the sun, and which provides this planet with abundant energy. And when you open your eyes, you can take in the sunlight, and this sunlight energy, rains down on us. The photons rain down on us. And we ingest the sunlight through plant life by eating plants. And with each heartbeat of the body and each in-breath, it's released in the body. And even if it's a cloudy day, there's still the sunlight there in the room. And maybe you can see some plants through the window or in your room. And just really, deeply contemplating that this room, this house, the plants, ourselves, and everybody here on the call, all of us, come from the earth and will return to the earth. And this is the understanding, which we need to integrate so that we will be changed on a very fundamental level from which we can reorganize the way we live, as a collective, as a global civilization. So that's going to take time, of course. But we're making a beginning here by doing it regularly, composting the old paradigm and making space and inviting a rewiring by contemplating and paying attention, to certain features of our lives we usually don't pay attention to. So really listening with the whole body, the energy body, listening into the body, which is our, kind of entrance into the body of the earth. And inviting the necessary change to take place in ourselves. Making this system, which we call me, making that available, composting the old understandings, making space, making way for the new. It's not new, but for us it's new, for our cultural paradigm that needs to go, that needs to be updated. Through deeply, sensing into this aliveness. And imagining, that other ways of being are possible and needed right now. Even we don't know exactly how they're gonna look like. But we can join forces with the intelligence of this living process we call planet Earth. That's a possibility. We can totally do that. This beautiful quote by Vanessa Andreotti. We can learn to trust the healing capacity of the Earth's metabolism to work through us. If we can decenter ourselves to allow it to happen. And and working with the grief and the fear and the anxiety, the confusion is part of it. And to come back to Sangha, to be able to hold steady with it. So that the vulnerability which we become aware of if we investigate and contemplate in this way, the lack of control, then metabolizes into a receptivity and a relinquishing of defenses. And then there's more and more capacity to experience oneself as part of a shared communication system, with planet Earth. Through eating, drinking, breathing, listening in like we are doing right now. That's all ways, how communication happens. Not through words, but through like this complete intimacy. Like the water of the watershed in your region, in your area, is part of you for some time. And then it goes out again. and becomes absorbed by the earth. So this very deep intimacy, to really experiencing it. As we then, more and more understand that our bodies, they don't stop at the skin. And in a way, the whole universe is involved, because all of the elements, all of the minerals, everything which make up this planet and our bodies comes from stars which have died in deep time. And then, the planet was shaped out of a huge dust cloud of stars which have exploded. It's just awesome to allow that to blow through the old paradigm. It's like a intense, like those leaf blowers some people use. I don't really like them, but that's what I think of, like really blowing the mind. And then there is maybe nothing. For some time there's this total sense of openness and awe. And then slowly, a new self-understanding is landing. And a process like that is unsettling, yes. That's why we need each other, To be unsettled together is helpful. It's a form of generosity, to allow the unsettledness and not fill it up quick, because it feels uncomfortable. It's a generosity, it's an offering to ourselves and to the bigger community. Because whatever happens, on a really deep level, we will always remain sympathetically bound, to the planet, because the planet has given birth to us. We just need to be able to connect with that again, to remember it. That we are part of a living, intelligent earth. And when we can see, little children playing out in the forest, or how they can take, great joy just very, very simple, small things in nature, because they are still more in touch with this deep connection with the earth, which has given birth to them, maybe just 2-3 years ago, whereas we are around a long time, and there's been a lot of conditioning going on, and it's buried underneath. So how do we reconnect with that? That's what we try to support in these sits. It's coming back to that deep bond which anybody which is born on this planet has, that bond. And all other animals, they live in harmony with the bigger system. We are kind of a bit, too clever for our own good. We need to catch up. And the gravity, the weight, which keeps us showing, where we come from and where we need to live as long as we have a body. That's a very clear signpost where the work lies. It's here. And we are now in a phase, of the evolution of our species where this is the big theme. And we are all called to participate. So sensing into this aliveness, which has to tell us something. Not with words, but by rewiring and feeling the discomfort of that and offering the space inside for it to happen. And today I have brought another poem by Rainer Maria Rilke, an Austrian poet. It's quite a famous poem. It's called How Surely Gravity's Law. How surely gravity's law, strong as an ocean current, takes hold of the smallest thing and pulls it towards the heart of the world. Each thing, each stone, blossom, child is held in place. Only we, in our arrogance, push out beyond what we each belong to, for some empty freedom. If we surrendered to Earth intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. Instead, we entangle ourselves in knots of our own making and struggle, lonely and confused. So like children, we begin again to learn from the things because they are in God's heart. They have never left there. This is what the things can teach us. To fall patiently, to trust our heaviness. Even a bird has to do that before it can fly. If we surrendered to Earth's intelligence, we could rise up rooted like trees. Instead, we entangle ourselves in knots of our own making and struggle, lonely and confused. So like children, we begin again to learn from the things because they are in God's heart. They have never left there. This is what the things can teach us, to fall patiently, to trust our heaviness. Even a bird has to do that before it can fly. So in a minute or so, I'm going to ring the bell.